Greetings! In this video, I'm going to be talking about my study guide for the advanced placement or the AP examinations I took as an international student studying in India. This entire video is going to be answering a few things. Number one, if you're an international student or if you're someone who's not from the US, should you be considering APs? Should you take APs? What are the pros and cons of it? And then for the majority of the video, I'm just going to be breaking down my study tips, my learning techniques for the advanced placement exams. To give you some context, I took 3 AP exams. I studied for all of them in under 1 month. I took AP Calculus AB, I took AP Psychology, and I took AP Microeconomics, and I got 8.5 on each of them. Woot woot. These are exams which, if you approach the right way, just become a lot easier, and that is exactly what I want to talk about in this video. What did I use to maximize the amount of time I had, which was 30 days, to try and make sure that I perform effectively on these tests? So let's get right into it. Before this video begins, this is the last weekend you can sign up for the live and interactive Dreamers College essay program, where I teach you about the college application essay personally. You can check out the link below. We have about 6 seats left, so it's going to be first come first serve. If you can grab a seat and get one, congratulations, I'll be teaching you from the April 1st onwards. Now, into the video.
Time just floated by. Well, I've won.
A lot of people ask me whether they should be taking advanced placement examinations, and number one, I think that the question is extremely personal. It depends on what context you are coming from. So I'm going to be quickly outlining in under 1 minute the pros and cons of taking an AP examination if you're not supposed to traditionally take one. First off, the pros. I think the benefits of the AP examinations are that it will save you a lot of money in university, because taking an AP course, if you didn't know, an advanced placement course is basically a college level course, which means that you can save on college classes if you take a course which mirrors that college class, which means that you get the credits that that college class would have given you, saving up on tuition fees. Number two, it is also an academic differentiator. If you're coming from a country like India, where not a lot of students are currently taking APs, then an AP can genuinely set you apart when you're presenting yourself to a college by making your educational experience come across as much more academically rigorous. Number three, it can also help you because if you do the AP examinations in the beginning of 12th grade, the syllabus basically is your 12th grade ISC or CBSE syllabus in most cases, which means that you will be better prepared for your school studies as well. Why shouldn't you take the APs? Number one, if you already come from an extremely rigorous academic curriculum like the IB curriculum, the IGCSE curriculum, the A levels, you don't need to take APs because your educational experience is already verified by an international organization as opposed to an Indian one like ICSE, CBSE, ISC. Number two, these are extremely expensive examinations to take. So if you can't afford one, you come from a genuinely low income circumstance, colleges understand that, colleges see that, and you don't need to pay 10,000 rupees for one exam. Number three, these are time intensive and pretty rigorous curriculums, especially given the fact that nobody is going to be teaching you in India about how to approach these tests, and you are going to be self-studying for the most part. I would say that it's a decision you should only make if you know that you have your extracurricular sorted, if your school academics are sorted, and it's not something I would recommend to students who are still building their profile up. So now I'm going to take you through a few learning strategies that I think really helped me and my study guide for the AP examinations for 2021.
Right between these eyes.
So first things first, what did I use to study for my AP examinations? The main resources I depended on were Barron's, which I used for AP Calculus AB, and I used it for AP Psychology. For Microeconomics, I used the Princeton Review book. I also really loved Khan Academy's program on Microeconomics and would definitely recommend it to anybody who wants to prep for these examinations. And apart from that, full disclosure, I did use a test prep service, Utella, for my AP Calculus AB prep, a little bit for Economics and Psychology as well, but for those two exams, for the most part, I was teaching myself. The very first thing I would recommend if you're going into your AP prep is you should establish a threshold level of knowledge. What do I mean by that? Basically, when you're entering this entire world of APs, if it's not something you're familiar with, if the syllabus is not something you're familiar with, I would suggest taking a practice test completely cold without having gone through any of the materials and concepts, so that you can establish a baseline upon which you start working. What that basically does is it outlines some of the basic concepts that you're already aware of, or you've got a good grip of or a good handle of, and then it also shows you all of the topics in which you need to work a lot more on. Maybe it shows a few topics in which you barely know anything and you're going to be having to focus on those chapters later on. It's basically going to channel your energy and give you a direction for your prep for the rest of the period of time. Now, I studied for 1 entire month for my AP examinations. I studied in April and I took it in May. Because of that, I had to manage my time extremely efficiently, and I basically used two main metrics. Number one, I'd have a daily to-do list in which I'd be talking about concepts I want to be covering, chapters I want to be covering on a day-to-day basis. And in case something wasn't covered on a particular day, I'd push it over to the next day. But to make sure that I don't keep pushing things in advance, I also had a weekly checklist, which is a 4-week plan for everything I wanted to do. I tackled the hardest chapters towards the end of the curriculum, but I would definitely say you should not leave anything really hard for the last week. Try to cover a bulk of your syllabus in the third week, and the first and second week is really your warm-up where you figure out the learning strategies that work the best for you, as well as you get an understanding of the format of the paper. For students who've never attempted APs before, this format is completely new. It's a format you haven't seen before, and to your surprise, a majority of the paper might actually come across as really easy in structure because it's multiple choice questions, which is why it's something that's going to be a little more fun for you, a little more exciting than just having to write pages and pages of information if you're an Indian student. Now, I'm going to be getting into the 4 main learning strategies that I tried to use when I was jumping into my AP prep. When I was studying for my AP examinations, there were 4 main techniques that I used throughout the entire process. And having taken my AP psychology course, I actually studied about some of them. So, number 1 is this idea of repetition. Now, there's this really famous psychologist, his name is Erman Ebbinghaus, and he basically came up with this curve of forgetting, or this rate of forgetting, where he basically graphed out how quickly people forget things if they're not revising it, if they're not repeating any of the work that they've done. And to give you a very brief understanding of it, within 18 minutes of having studied something, you tend to forget about 45% of the material that you covered. Now, how do you work towards resolving that? In another study, it was shown that if you are repeating the information that you've taken in, or you're revising it, or you're recalling it, that really makes sure that your rate of forgetting something is not going to be at the same pace as what it was earlier. So, if you look at this graph over here, you're going to notice that if you manage to repeat the material you've learned, your forgetting rate instantly shoots back up, in the sense that you're going to be retaining a lot of the information that you already learned. And if you do this at regular intervals, if you do your first repetition within 18 minutes, your second repetition within 1 day, and your third repetition within 7 days or a week, you're going to be staggering the rate of forgetting, which is going to help you to retain information at a much more effective rate. And if you notice, in the third repetition for a week, it basically brings your attention back up to 100%. So this is something that I definitely recommend when you're studying for your AP examinations. If you look at a particular concept, you study a particular concept, it is not enough to just read it once. It's not enough to do your entire syllabus once. You have to be doing it on multiple cycles in order to ensure that it actually sticks in your head. The second thing that really helped me for microeconomics in particular is something that's commonly known as spider notes. And what it basically does is that it organizes the information in your head. The reason that I really liked spider notes for microeconomics in particular is that every chapter in any syllabus whatsoever has some form of a general flow. And sometimes it's very easy to get lost in that general flow, and it's very hard to visualize what the different subtopics are and how one topic relates with another topic and what the relationship between different aspects of a particular chapter is. So I'm actually going to quickly show you what I'm talking about. This is a very simple example of how I basically studied supply. So if you look over here, I've basically outlined every single thing that this chapter had, and what I try to do is condense every single thing to one page, and then I try to establish the relationships between one particular concept and other different things. And something that really helps me out is diagrams. So I'd constantly draw mini diagrams all over the page, which would really help me organize and create a visual system of every single thing that I had to remember. So just to summarize, the entire benefit of a spider map is number 1, visual organization. You get to understand how the entire chapter looks like. Number 2, it also makes for a really easy understanding of the relationship between different things. Now that's just on the note-taking side, but when you're about to enter into your examination and when you're trying to do really quick and rapid summaries and revisions of an entire chapter, spider maps really help you, because they become essentially a Blinkist or a really short bite of information that covers every single thing that you were supposed to know. And also when you're trying to test yourself and when you're trying to do any form of active recall, you can just cover different parts of the chapter and just ask yourself questions, and it's just very easy and simple in my opinion. So that was all about spider notes. The third thing that really helped me, and this is just a very short one, is mnemonics. And mnemonics is something that you've probably heard about before. Whenever I was studying any concept for AP psychology, there were often a lot of subheadings which had multiple different points. So for example, if you're talking about intelligence, what is structural intelligence? If you talk about the big 5 factor theory, for example, all of us know it as ocean, and that really makes it a lot easier to stick. It's not some really profound rocket science. It's just something that's going to help you create an association in your memory that's going to stick for a much longer period of time. The last learning technique that really helped me out is actually something developed by an MMA fighter, and this individual's name is Frank Shamrock, and what it's called is the plus, minus, and the equal to technique. technique. What it basically means is that when you're learning something, you can learn something in 3 different ways. You can have a plus, you can have a minus, or you can have an equal to. Plus is basically when you're learning from someone who is more experienced than you, like a mentor for example, or a teacher for example. Minus is when you're explaining the concept to someone who's younger than you or more inexperienced than you or might not know a concept particularly well. And equal to is when you're learning a concept with someone who is basically in the same boat as you, maybe another peer, another student. And what it basically says is when you learn in these 3 different ways, each of them have their own benefits. In plus, for example, when you're learning from a teacher is possibly able to explain complex topics in a very simple manner to you. And whenever you have a doubt or whenever you attempt a practice paper, a teacher is an individual who can correct it for you. That is one way to learn. Then you have minus when you're explaining it to someone. And I've spoken about this before, but this is basically the Feynman technique. When you're explaining something to someone who's junior to you, might not understand it as well, your understanding of a topic becomes much, much better. And then comes the equal to sign, which is basically studying with someone who is similar to you, is a peer to you. In this sense, it's a lot more fun to just peer review or peer study with somebody else. You can quiz them, they can quiz you. If they're your friend, then you could review some of their practice papers, you guys could exchange doubts together. It's just a way of learning where everyone is getting pushed together. It's an interesting way to learn and it's going to make your really monotonous AP calculus syllabus a little easier to handle. So those are the 4 main learning strategies that I employed. Now I'm going to be getting on to the next step of preparation, which is all about testing.
Is how I wanna go.
There are a few aspects I really wanted to make sure I honed in on during testing. Now, it's very commonly known that the best piece of advice anybody can give you to study for any AP examination is just to study as many tests and take as many tests as you can. The reason for this is because even though repetition is extremely important to make sure that you're familiar with the concept, if you're unable to retrieve a particular concept from your memory, it's practically useless because then you're unable to apply it to an exam. Whenever studies have been done on repetition and reading your notes versus actually taking tests, your memory and your performance enhances at a much faster rate when you're doing it through a test rather than if you're just studying your notes. And the reason is because you're applying your knowledge in a note. It is not just repetition, it's retrieving. Now, apart from that, there were a few things I had to keep in mind when approaching the AP tests. Number 1 is the format. The AP examinations are split into multiple choice questions and the free response questions. Now, the MCQs are fairly straightforward, but it's in the free response questions that some people can tend to get tangled in the question, so they might not know how to approach it. In those instances, the most important thing that I realized was looking at the grading rubrics and understanding for what they'll give you what score. So for example, if something is out of 7 marks, right, they're going to be giving you 3 marks if you've said this, 4 marks if you said this. It's something that Indians are very familiar with, but it's like a keyword strategy. If you know this particular keyword, insert it, you're going to be getting a mark for that. They don't have the time to read all of your lengthy answers and then judge how good your subjective approach to the question was. They're looking for particular pointers, and if you give them those pointers, they'll be giving you the points. So looking at the grading rubrics for how College Board judges your AP is extremely important. The next thing that's also really helpful is just maintaining a running list or a Google Doc of everything you get wrong. The reason I say that is because every time you make a mistake, you want to make sure that you don't make that mistake again, and also you want to understand why that mistake was made in the first place and what chapter it was made from. If you notice all of the mistakes you've made, when I was studying for AP psychology, for example, I noticed that when it came to memory or when it came to the nervous system, I was making a lot more mistakes in that particular chapter than from any other chapter. So naturally I realized that okay, maybe it's not my strongest chapter. I went back to it. Another thing that's really important sometimes is also understanding why you got something right. This is not something a lot of people say because it is kind of inefficient, but I think that sometimes even if you're gray on a question, you're slightly uncertain and you take a question and you got it right, please go back to it, because if you hesitated over there was a chance you could have been wrong. And understanding what reasoning led to you being right is also something that's going to pay off in the future. More important than that, however, is understanding your margin of error, because sometimes when taking tests like these, it's not as important as getting everything right as it is being smart. Whenever you take a standardized test, you know that there is some margin of error to get a perfect score. So when you're taking a test out of 5, for example, in the AP examination, you should definitely look at what the margin of error is, because every AP has a different margin of error. In AP Psychology, for example, it is a relatively easier exam than the AP Calculus exam, which means you can make more mistakes, or you can afford to make more mistakes in AP Psychology. So if you're taking the test and you get stuck on something and you think, oh my god, I'm not going to get a 5 because of this, if you've read the margin of error and you know you can afford to lose those many marks, move on to the next question, because you don't want that one question to bring down your entire exam. So that's pretty much everything I have on my AP study guide for 2021. I hope this video helped you out. I hope that you can also apply some of these things to different concepts and different aspects of your life. And I think the main thing to remember is that if you have a system in place for, studying any of these chapters and making sure that you complete your syllabus on time, you're going to be set. Having particular days and particular hours set aside for studying either the AP Psychology or the AP Economics or the AP Calculus course, those things are going to be a lot more easy for you to maintain, because you're just going to build your consistency over a period of time, as opposed to just sitting on the last night and trying to cram everything. So I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you next week.